Thanks for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself and to share our family caregiving story. My name is Deb Hallisey. I'm coming to you from Central New Jersey. I spent 30 years as a career as a consultant working for Ernst & Young and Huron Consulting Group doing end user training, writing the training, doing the training, and then also writing e-learning. And I lost my job due to caregiving issues, which is not an unusual story. But what it led to is me launching the website Advocate for Mom and Dad, which is now my full-time career. And I really did it partially as a way to pay it forward and to thank all the people who were so generous in giving me their time and their knowledge when I really started heavily down this caregiving journey. And so it's really an educational resource for adult children of aging parents. And now I'm doing consulting work with families, actually mentoring them and educating them and helping them find the resources they need really wherever they are in this caregiving journey, because it is a journey. So as a caregiver, I have cared for my dad. He was diagnosed in 2014 with congestive heart failure, and I saw him through that. And Dad was Mom's caregiver. So that was the start of my journey of being caregiver for my mom. My mom is 86. She's legally blind with mobility issues, but she does have all her faculties, and I'm grateful for that. Dementia is not part of our family story. In 2015, we lost my dad to congestive heart failure, and that's when I became Mom's caregiver and responsible for her, a house that's 60 years old, her dog, just all kinds of stuff. And it's interesting because I didn't really self-identify as a caregiver until I became responsible for my mom, but in reality, I was a caregiver long before that. And I think that's one of the lessons learned for me is we don't really self-identify early enough as caregivers. Thinking about this, I realized that there was a long-term consulting assignment that I had that was close to where Mom and Dad lived. And I actually started being a caregiver because once a week I would have dinner with them. And then that became staying overnight with them. And then it became I would be going grocery shopping for myself and pick up some things for them. And then it was going to the doctors with Dad, so a second set of ears were there. So becoming a caregiver kind of crept up on me, and I didn't realize all those things was the start of that journey. But I have to share a story with you that was really a taste of how overwhelming it can be. About 8 years ago, my dad was out walking his dog, their dog, Bella, and she was attacked by another dog. And in saving her, he really got bit up, terribly so. And he was on a blood thinner. So for him, it was life-threatening. And thank God he had the wherewithal. He picked up Bella, was taking her back to the house, and literally called 911 because he was bleeding so profusely. And so when that happened, I actually moved in with my parents for about 3 months. I was taking care of my father. My father couldn't take care of my mother, so I was taking care of her. Neither could take care of the dog, so I was taking care of the dog. And oh yes, I had just started as a consultant with Ernst & Young about 3 weeks before that. So I was trying to manage a brand new job, and part of working as a consultant and training as I did was I traveled a lot all across the US and Canada. And so we had to find somebody and hire them so that they could stay with my parents and care for my parents and the dog while I had to be in Chicago a couple of days every couple of weeks. So wow, it was a trial by fire to go through that, and a precursor to what it would be like when my dad was diagnosed and I became his caregiver. So it's kind of interesting being caregiver for my mom because she does have 24/7 live-in care when I'm not there. I'm her caregiver every other weekend, a doctor appointment, if there's something that needs to be done with the house, if her dog needs help. And so it's interesting because when I'm with her physically, and this is one of the weekends, I'm headed up to to Mom's house in a little bit. It's physical things. It's like putting on her socks and her shoes. It's laying out her clothes the night before so she can put them on. I manage her medications, both her insulin shots and her actual meds. She has a doctor's appointment. In the house, she uses what I call her go card. It's the rollator. But if she needs to leave in a wheelchair. So I take her to all her doctor's appointments. If there's a family event, we do that. Walk her dog, take Bella to the vets, go grocery shopping, do her banking. And part of it's interesting too, is it's just keeping her safe. Mom still lives in the house that I grew up in, and it's 60 years old. And so part of keeping her safe is making sure that the house is in good repair. And I just consider that part of her healthcare costs. And then it's really weird. It's little things. I'll tell you it's funny now, but it wasn't funny when it happened. I was caring for her one weekend and sound asleep. And now that bedroom is right next to hers. But she had gotten out of bed to go to the bathroom and slid getting back into bed and couldn't get up. And I never heard her. So thank God she was able to get to her medic alert type advice. So all of a sudden, boom, Doris, are you okay? Well, I just about hit the ceiling and went running into her bedroom, realized she was on the floor, couldn't get her up. And I'm like trying to help her, screaming into the other room, just give me a minute, just give me a minute. And they're like, are you okay? It was just bedlam. And the long and short of it was we had to get somebody in to help me get her off the floor. And she was fine, thank God. But what she didn't tell me was from all the years, the rug right by her bed was like glass. And so of course she slid on it. So, I'm like, okay, we're not going to replace the carpet. What are we going to do? So I wound up buying one of those rugs that go around a toilet that has the grip on the bottom. And then I bought the kind of stuff that you put underneath the carpet and put that on top. So now outside of her bed, where she gets up, is this carpet that she can step on that really grips. And that made her feel safe. It's a good solution. And so I'm oftentimes playing what I call MacGyver, like, okay. Another example is for her to watch TV, she has to go down the den, which is 2 steps, and the carpet is the exact same color, so she can't see the difference. So I wound up putting electrical tape, both gray and black, all across the steps so she has the depth perception. Every time I go, I make sure it's not coming up. It's still safe. I've replaced it. So sometimes it's just these MacGyver-like things to look at the situation and say, okay, this is a potential danger. How can I keep her safe? How can I keep her safe? And when I'm not with her, I consider myself her caregiver because I'm still her caregiver. I pay her bills. I make calls to doctors and prescriptions. I follow up. The house needs something, I'm following up. And then there's the once a day we talk, and then there's that second phone call with the remote on the TV isn't working. How do I fix it? We need to replace the batteries in the smoke detector. Do you remember where they are? The phone is buzzing. Do you know what I can do about it? And so with all these kind of like, all right, let me try and troubleshoot it from an hour away. And some of it waits until I get up there, and some of it I go up the next day and fix it. So, you don't have to be with someone 24/7 to be their caregiver. You're still a caregiver, whether it's 12,000 miles away or 50. So it's the family dynamics I feel so lucky to have. I have a brother that lives about 12 hours away. So he and his wife are not able to do the physical hands-on stuff, but they really do support my mother and I in other ways. They're the ones that make sure that my mom's lawn gets cut, so I don't have to worry about it, and mom doesn't have to worry about it. And I'm so appreciative because much of what they do is actually to help me as much as mom and take some of the burden off. There's been Mother's Days or holidays when they couldn't be with us, but they'll call and say, hey, we're going to send you dinner. What restaurant do you want it to be from? And then they have it delivered, which is so sweet. It brings them to us, even though they can't be with us physically. It means mom doesn't have to cook, which thrills her no end. And so it's really, really wonderful. And my brother and I are and my sister-in-law are 100% in agreement with my mom, because we're a team, about how we want her care to go. So that whole family dynamic of siblings, just being at odds with one another, or one wanting one thing for a parent and the parent doesn't want it. I am so fortunate, and I know that the family dynamics are such that we really are a team, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. I find caregiving rewarding, and I kind of didn't expect that. I will tell you that it's both a privilege and a blessing to see someone through their end of life. It's hard, but being there for them, honoring their wishes changes you. It's a life-changing experience. And being able to do that for my dad, I wouldn't have it any other way. It really was a blessing. And in terms of the caregiving with my mom, it's interesting. So much of caregiving is tied into family dynamics, but at a personal level, like what was your relationship as a parent-child, right? Which carries over into an adult. And oftentimes you need to work through some of that stuff in order to be the best person and the best caregiver. And I will tell you, I had to work through stuff with my mom. But coming through the other end and being a team with her and being closer to her than I ever would have thought we'd get to has been an incredible blessing, and makes this a joy. Frustrating often, but an absolute joy to be her caregiver. And kind of the flip side of the blessing and the underlying of that is there are challenges to being a caregiver as well. And I will tell you that the biggest one is letting go of resentment from past hurts. It really, really is. It's so easy to be in a situation and just wail yourself back into being that 8-year-old child and not the adult that you are, and able to interact with your caree adult to adult. And I'm not going to tell you that there aren't times that I don't still feel that way, but I can now take that step back and say, wait a second, is this really something that you need to be resentful about or angry about? And if you are, that's okay. It's part of the emotion. Or is this you just being that little kid, I don't wanna kind of stuff, the I don't wannas, I shouldn't have to. And you know what, as an adult, you do have to sometimes, and you just suck it up and you do it. I think the other big hurdle is coming to terms with the fact that my life has changed forever. And by that, I mean, I had thoughts about where I wanted to retire, and it wasn't necessarily New Jersey. But guess what? I can't make plans to do that right now because I don't know what's going to happen with my mom, right? And there are other things, like because I'm a caregiver every other weekend, there are things friends do, and I'm like, it's a mom weekend, I can't. And even, I'll tell you, kind of not a funny story, but this is just the way it is. I had made plans to go to Atlantic City with friends. And I had been with my mom, and her caregiver asked for an extra day because she was going to the doctors. She was due at my mom's like in an hour. So I left my mother's, was literally sitting in the driveway of the daycare where my dog will stay overnight, when her caregiver called and said, I'm being admitted to the hospital. I said, okay. Sitting in the driveway, called the woman that owns the business and said, guess what? I'm in your driveway. Joshy's not staying with you. I have to go back to my mom's. And the next phone call I made was to friends and said, I can't go. I'm sorry to cancel on the last minute, but caregiver called. She's being admitted to the hospital. I'm headed back to mom's. I don't know how long I'm going to be there. And so, just saying, this is it. This is life right now, and things can change on a dime, and you have to be ready for it, and you have to just be at peace with it, is part of being a caregiver and part of those hurdles that you have to get over. And I'm pretty good at it now, but some of that stuff is still there. I work on it all the time. So it's interesting, being in this space, both as a professional, as a caregiver, you also often hear the term caregiver toolkit, and what do you rely on? Are there rituals? Are there services or supports or people? And I have to tell you that I rely on my family, my extended family, a lot for support for Mom. Not physically, but socially and emotionally. I am so fortunate. Living in New Jersey, we have relatives that are, within a half hour, an hour away. And I have cousins that will come and spend an afternoon with Mom. They might bring her lunch or just sit and talk with her. And for her, that social and emotional connection is what keeps her going. And Kat, I know the story. Last week, my cousin brought her 3-year-old grandson to see Mom, and they had dinner with her and had visited for about 3 hours. And I called her after they were gone, and Rachel, the joy in her voice just filled me up. It really did. Like, so how was it? She goes, "Oh my God, I'm exhausted. He doesn't stop." But she had such a smile in her face when she said it. She said, "But he's so sweet and he's so cute, and he wouldn't leave Bella alone. He wanted to, pet, but Bella got a walk. Cole and Kathy took Bella for a walk, so she was happy, and they had dinner together, and it just kept her going for days afterwards. We talked about it. And so I know, and my mom and I have talked about how fortunate we are to have that social support with family. And then I have friends who support me and understand when at the last minute I have to say, I can't do this, or sorry, I wish I could join you. And I have wonderful friends who will say to me, so when can we get together? And we talk about dates, and like, well, you know what? I'll tell you what. Let's go. Well, how about if we meet you at your mom's house for dinner? Or you and your mom and I go to a restaurant together. And because these are friends from childhood, it's not only visiting with me, it's visiting with my mother. And again, that social and emotional support is so important to her. And plus, it gives her stuff to do. Like if they're coming to dinner, she's Italian, so she has to cook, right? So she'll make dinner. And that's one of the things we'll do together. In fact, for Easter, we had 19 people to Easter dinner, 5 different families, and every family went home with a homemade banana bread and soup she had made over the winter. And that, being able to give her love like that, makes all the difference in the world for her and for me, for her to be able to do it. And I think the other thing in terms of services and supports, key things, is I really work hard every single weekend to find time to be her daughter and not just her caregiver. It might be taking her in the car for a ride. It might be playing cards. It might be sitting in the living room with me on the phone on Facebook and catching her up with the family information, because with her eyesight, she can't do that kind of thing. So it's really find a block of time when I'm not task focused, but I'm her daughter. So the other thing we often talk about as caregivers is self-care, and what do you do for yourself? And I have to tell you that journaling, which everybody says you should do, really does help me, particularly at stressful times. I can't tell you that I'm disciplined and do it every day, nor can I tell you that I meditate. I'm disciplined about that. But when I'm really stressed, those are 2 things that help me tremendously. Because you can write whatever you want in that journal and no one will see it but you. But the other piece of that for me is if I'm venting, I work really hard to end it with, this is what I'm grateful for, because otherwise for me, it's not a good practice. Taking Josh or Bella on long walks really help me. I wish I could tell you I was more disciplined about exercise. I'm not. But, the long walks help. And seeing friends on the weekends that I'm home helps. And I have to tell you, this career as a blogger really helps, because when you're writing from personal experience, you kind of work it out in that writing. And so that's been an unexpected blessing, the blogging, and how that really helps me to process things and come to other conclusions and decisions and think about how I'm doing things. Kind of the other end of self-care is always the question of what do you do for fun? What would you do if you weren't caregiving? And that's really an interesting question because so much of it requires money, which I don't have a lot of at the moment while I'm starting this business. But I do, when it's not for work and not stressful, I do love to travel and see places and see things. So being able to travel someplace new that I've not been and take it in and the history of it is amazing. And you know what's so funny? When I was consulting a lot and traveling, a lot of times they put you like in apartments, you know, so you could cook and stuff. This is going to sound really weird, but one of the things I always did was I went to the grocery store because you learned so much about the community you were in for those 3, 4, 5, 6 months just by going to the grocery store. You know, did it have a lot of, you know, Asian products? Did it have a lot of Latino products, you know, Polish products? You kind of got a feel for it. And so going and learning about the community, seeing sites. If I had one day off, head to the Jersey Shore and just chill by the water. That's my thing to do, is get by water. Kind of one of the questions I get is, do you have any advice? You know, this is going on with mom or dad or an aunt or whatever, and I'm so afraid, you know, I'm concerned how I'm going to handle this. And I will tell you, my first bit of advice is don't stick your head in the sand. You will be a caregiver at some point, or you are going to need care for somebody at some point. And so the very first article that I ever posted was called 4 Tips Before You Become a Caregiver. And I still tell people about this and point to it on the website. And that is, do you know what the person you're going to care for wants for end of life? And that gets into the entire idea of advanced directives. It gets into the entire idea of having those difficult conversations. If you got sick, what would you want me to do and not do? The second thing I tell them is, given the HIPAA laws, can you legally talk to their doctors? Because if you haven't had that conversation and you are not either attending the office visit and they're giving verbal permission while you're with them, or they haven't put in your contact information when they fill out that form once a year, you might be blocked from talking to the doctors. And that's a horrible place to be. So the other thing I would say, the third thing out of the 4 is, do you have durable power of attorney for finances? God forbid somebody goes in the hospital and they can't write out their bills. Can you do it for them? I have to tell you, that is the single most important document I have for my mom because of her eyesight. I use that every day. And when, you know, even when Dad died and we had to turn everything over, everybody wanted that document. And I'll share a story that's in the blog. And that is, my dad and I talked multiple times about the fact that I was going to be his durable power of attorney because physically I was the closest child. Talked about it. He goes into the hospital. I'm not even sure he's going to make it. I pull out the document and he had never signed it. I'm like, oh my God. 3 days in, he's feeling better. His sister and his niece come to visit. I bring that document to the hospital. A friend drives an hour because it needs to be notarized. And in the hospital, everybody signs it. She notarizes it. And then we went right to my mother's house and did the exact same thing. So even though you talk about these documents, make sure they're truly in place. It's critical. And then the 4th thing is, do you know what resources you can tap into, right? And part of that means having a hard conversation about finances, because many of these resources are built based on need. And if you don't meet the requirements, we're talking private pay. So not putting your head in the sand, starting those difficult conversations. Maybe it's the drip method because you're not going to get anywhere the first time. Maybe you can talk to a sibling of your loved one or a cousin or a peer of the same age who maybe they'll listen to before they listen to you to get that conversation started. But not putting your head in the sand, realizing these are the 4 things you need to be thinking about or actively working towards literally before you become a caregiver is the advice I wish someone had given me prior to.